No, I actually don't really expect to talk about that again until Nintendo makes an official announcement. Well, instead of the Mario remasters, I figured we should talk about the Zelda remasters. Welcome everyone, this is Honest Restart. This time we're talking about Nintendo's plans for Zelda for 2020 and beyond. What's going on with Breath of the Wild 2? What if this Cadence of Hyrule physical release? And what if that tease we got a while ago about Skyward Sword on Switch? Could that be a part of a Zelda Remaster collection similar to the rumored Mario Remaster collection? Perhaps. So we're going to be talking about all of that today. Now before we jump into things, I want to talk a little bit about my social media. There's a Twitter page, a Discord community, a Patreon page, and a Twitch channel. If you're interested in any of that, check it all out. It is linked in the description below. To get things started, let's first talk about how supposedly Nintendo plans to come out with a Zelda game every single year. We got reports about that a while ago, how Nintendo wants to have at least one Zelda game come out every single year, which I do think makes sense because, well, the Zelda franchise is a growing brand, especially with Breath of the Wild. It is the best-selling Zelda game of all time, so the Zelda franchise, while it has always been big, is reaching even greater heights and becoming more comparable to Mario, which I think is just a remarkable thing. Just the simple notion of Breath of the Wild having similar sales to Mario Odyssey is really impressive. Now, Breath of the Wild had actually come out before Mario Odyssey, but Mario Odyssey eventually overtook the sales for Breath of the Wild, but more recently Breath of the Wild caught back up and is actually selling slightly better than Mario Odyssey, and I think that's just a crazy thing to consider. A 3D Zelda game is outselling a 3D Mario game. That is special. It shows that the Zelda franchise is special, and Nintendo can really push this series to even greater heights in the future. So bearing that in mind, like Mario, Nintendo probably does want to come out with a lot of different Zelda games all the time because it's a very popular brand and it's only growing. So I am inclined to believe that Nintendo does want to come out with a Zelda game every single year. And if we look at the Switch, in 2017 we got Breath of the Wild. In 2018, we got Hyrule Warriors. In 2019, we got Link's Awakening Remake and Cadence of Hyrule. Now, Cadence of Hyrule is made by an indie team, but it has some Nintendo support and some Zelda characters, which is why it's pretty cool, but it is a smaller spin-off-like kind of title. But that, in conjunction with Link's Awakening, I thought was a pretty good amount of Zelda content for last year. Which brings us to 2020, the mess that is 2020, or the... I don't know what to really call it, because it has been a slow year for Nintendo games, but at the same time, it has been a pandemic year, so that definitely, obviously, has something to do with it, I think. Maybe not entirely, but somewhat. But either way, we did get an announcement about something Zelda for 2020, and that was the physical release for Cadence of Hyrule with some DLC. Now again, this is a smaller project, and this is not even a new release. This is DLC for a smaller project from last year, but it is getting a physical release and it's coming out this October. Is it possible that that's the only Zelda game that could be coming out this year? I think that's a possibility. Now, do I think that's appropriate support for the Zelda franchise? No, not really. Again, this is not just Cadence of Hyrule releasing on its own. Cadence of Hyrule already came out. This is simply a physical release with some DLC. Last year, we got the actual release for Cadence of Hyrule and the Link's Awakening remake, which is a much bigger deal than Cadence of Hyrule, something that's made by an indie team. So if we were to assume that Nintendo wants to hold to that rule of Zelda content every single year, I don't think that would be enough, just this DLC physical release for Cadence of Hyrule. But I don't think Nintendo has to hold to that rule. I don't think there's a hard rule there that there has to be a Zelda game every single year, but in general, trying to push Zelda as much as they can to grow it as a franchise and use it, just like Mario, to obviously have a lot of sales makes sense. I do think Nintendo wants to try and do that. So the point I'm trying to make here is that while I think it would have made sense to have something bigger come out, say for example like a Skyward Sword HD or Breath of the Wild 2, I think it's possible that Nintendo could just have the Cadence of Hyrule physical release be the only Zelda content for this year. And not because they intended on having that to be the dedicated, really awesome Zelda content, just that they don't really have to hold themselves to coming out with major Zelda content every single year. That all said, is there something else Zelda coming out in 2020? And I gotta say, at this point, I am skeptical. I am maintaining my prediction that Breath of the Wild 2 is going to come out this year. I've been predicting that since E3 2019, since the game has been revealed. And there's a lot of reasons why I think it's possible, but also, they haven't revealed it yet, and we are already in August. By the time you guys see this video, it will be August. So, yeah, I think it is becoming increasingly less likely, but I'll also argue that Nintendo hasn't advertised any of their games for the second half of 2020, so I do think there's still a chance maybe Zelda could come out this year, especially considering this is a sequel using the Breath of the Wild engine. They've been developing it since 2017, and they revealed it back at E3 2019, and it was a story trailer, and story is usually done late into development for Zelda games. So for all of those reasons, I think there's a pretty good chance that Zelda is very far along, and it would have had a chance to come out this year perhaps. We did have some rumors early on this year and last year that Breath of the Wild 2 was going to be Nintendo's big holiday game, but when it comes to development of Zelda, I think Nintendo is very fluid with that release date because they focus on making sure the game could be as good as it possibly can. And I think that's probably why Nintendo didn't give it an actual release date back at E3 2019, because they did not want to hold themselves to a particular date. They didn't want to announce a delay because that's going to upset fans. Instead, they just gave us a trailer and they didn't really tell us when it's going to be coming out. So while I think it's possible that Zelda could come out this year, it's also entirely possible it could come out sometime next year, maybe early next year or late next year, and a lot of that's going to depend on just how large the scope of the development is going to be. In my opinion, if you're returning to the same world, same Hyrule, and you're using the same engine, then 3 years of development is more than enough time to make a massive, dense, open world game, but we don't know what Nintendo's plans are for Breath of the Wild 2. They might be doing something crazy here, and the scope could be even grander, so for sure it could come out a little bit later. So if that ends up being the case, when could we see Breath of the Wild 2? It's possible it's a holiday 2021 game, but I think there is a decent chance it could have been coming out for this year, and they may have just internally delayed it a little bit longer. If that's the case, I could see it maybe coming out this March, kind of like Animal Crossing New Horizons. At first, Animal Crossing New Horizons was slated for 2019, and we were all thinking it was going to be like a big November or December game, but it was delayed a few more months into March of the next year, this year, March 2020. Considering everything we've already mentioned that suggests that Zelda is far into development, it's possible the game may have been close to coming out this year, but maybe, because of the scope of the game or potential delays or what have you, it's going to come out a little bit later, but not too much later, and it could sort of match that big major release for March of next year. So we got Animal Crossing this March in 2020, maybe March 2021, we get Breath of the Wild 2. I think that's definitely possible, and it could work out really well, especially considering that March is still a part of the fiscal year. And as I've mentioned pretty much in every video lately, Nintendo has told their investors that they have unannounced games planned for the fiscal year, and they have games to come out for this fiscal year that still maintain a pretty good forecast in terms of sales. If Breath of the Wild 2 is a part of that forecast, that would make a lot of sense, because that would definitely support stronger sales for this fiscal year. Not to mention, March 2021 would mark the 4-year anniversary for both Breath of the Wild and the Nintendo Switch, and next year is the 35th anniversary for the Zelda series, so they could definitely come up with some pretty cool marketing for Breath of the Wild 2 and the 35th anniversary. I think it's also worth noting that unlike Mario, which is in September for its anniversary, which is why I think the Mario Remasters, or at least part of why I think the Mario Remasters are coming out then, for this year, the anniversary for Zelda is actually February. So maybe they could tie in a Breath of the Wild 2 March release to the anniversary because it's so close to that time. And even if it doesn't come out close to that time, the year is an anniversary year, and that's all that really matters, I think. If we look at Skyward Sword, that came out holiday 2011, and that was celebrating Zelda's 25th anniversary. And as I already said, technically the anniversary for Zelda is in February, but they celebrated it in November. So I don't really think they have to hold themselves to that particular month, but it would kind of make sense. For the sake of the argument, let's just assume for the time being that Breath of the Wild 2 is a holiday 2021 title. If that's the case, would Nintendo not have anything else to celebrate Zelda during that anniversary period? Well, again, like I said, it doesn't have to fall under the exact time or close to the same time to celebrate the anniversary. But, similar to how we may be getting the Mario Remasters for Mario's 35th anniversary this year, what if we get another sort of collection for Zelda next year for its anniversary? Now, a while ago, Aonuma came out during a Zelda concert and said, Skyward Sword for Switch, right? Or something along those lines. I'm paraphrasing here based off my memory, but I'll put the quote in the actual editing for this video. And of all the 3D Zeldas that have come out before the Nintendo Switch, the only one that hasn't gone some sort of remaster remake is Skyward Sword. So maybe Skyward Sword is next in line, and maybe that's in the works. Maybe they could be using that to celebrate Zelda's 35th anniversary the same way how they used Skyward Sword to celebrate the 25th anniversary. What was special about Skyward Sword wasn't that it was just a whole new awesome Zelda game, but it was also that it was the first in the actual chronology and timeline for the Zelda series. So that's a very good game to use to celebrate the anniversary for Zelda. So it really wouldn't shock me if some sort of HD remasters in the works for Skyward Sword. I think that'd be really awesome. Some people have even speculated that maybe that could come out this year. I'm skeptical of that, mainly because we're already getting so many remasters and enhanced ports this year. We got Tokyo Mirage Sessions, we got Xenoblade Chronicles Definitive Edition, supposedly there's a Mario Remasters and Pikmin 3 Deluxe and 3D World Deluxe, so if we get all of that and Skyward Sword HD, that'll be a lot. And while we're at it, I feel it's also worth mentioning that there's Metroid Prime Trilogy HD supposedly. Nintendo may be saving that for a rainy day, but it could potentially come out this year or early next year. The point being, I'd be kinda shocked if Nintendo shoves in all these different remasters with barely any original games coming out this year. I just think that wouldn't really be a good look. At the same time, this has been a slow year, so maybe that's all they're gonna rely on. It's possible, but I'm skeptical. Ultimately, what I'm thinking here is that Skyward Sword HD will not be coming out this year. But what if Nintendo is saving Skyward Sword for the 35th anniversary celebration for Zelda? Similar to how supposedly Nintendo has a whole bunch of Mario plans for its 35th anniversary with different game releases like Paper Mario, the Mario Remaster Collection, and 3D World Deluxe. What if Nintendo has similar plans for Zelda? What if it's not just one Zelda game like Breath of the Wild 2? What if it's Breath of the Wild 2, but also a Zelda Remaster Collection? Something to compare to the Mario Remaster Collection. If the Mario Remasters are real, and we're getting Mario 64 Sunshine and Galaxy remastered in HD all together as one compilation package, then Nintendo's already created a standard of having 3 awesome games in one. So, what if next year, to celebrate Zelda's 35th anniversary, Nintendo offers a Zelda Remaster Collection? And the games I have in mind are Twilight Princess HD, Wind Waker HD, and Skyward Sword HD. Considering that both Wind Waker and Twilight Princess have already gotten the HD treatment, there wouldn't really be that much work to be done for those particular games. You would just be putting them into a package along with a brand new remastered Skyward Sword HD, and I think that would be a really good package, and it wouldn't be as much work as a Mario Remasters, but it would still be a really good deal that people would be really excited about. There's been a lot of requests for both Wind Waker and Twilight Princess HD to come to the Nintendo Switch. There is a demand there, and I think eventually Nintendo's going to want to get all the different Zelda games on the Switch. And since we're talking about other Zelda games getting remastered, there's also Ocarina of Time and Majora's Mask. Those games got the 3D remake treatment on the 3DS. Could we at some point see those games come to Switch? Well, it wouldn't shock me if Nintendo does something to bring them over to the Switch, but it wouldn't surprise me if it just ends up being some sort of N64 classic online package where we have Ocarina of Time and Majora's Mask. Now, don't get me wrong, I would love it if someday Nintendo were to revisit Ocarina of Time and Majora's Mask and remake them, but actually remake them, not just scaling up the graphics for Ocarina of Time and Majora's Mask on the 3DS. That wouldn't really be satisfactory, at least for my personal taste. I would want something a little bit more ambitious. But that's more of a wish and a hope as opposed to an actual expectation or prediction here. I think there's a pretty good chance we could be seeing some sort of Zelda Remaster Collection in the future. Now, am I super confident? No, there's no rumor suggesting this. There isn't like a lot of evidence, but I just think it makes sense from a business/logical perspective, so it wouldn't shock me if there is some sort of Zelda Remaster Collection in the near future. I think that would be really cool, and it could go over really well for a 35th anniversary of Zelda celebration. It would just be awesome. Now, some of you may be wondering about a potential 2D Zelda game coming to Switch. We're talking about all these different 3D Zelda games. What about 2D Zelda? Well, we just got Link's Awakening on Switch last year, so I'm not expecting anything new for 2D Zelda for a little while. Maybe in 2022 we could see something, and if that does happen, what would it be? I think maybe they could remake either Oracle of Ages and Seasons or The Minish Cap. Either of those Zelda games would be really great to see. Heck, why do they have to remake another Zelda game? What if they were to make a brand new 2D Zelda game with HD graphics? I would really like to see a new 2D Zelda game with HD visuals. That would be beautiful to see. Imagine if Link Between Worlds is made in HD. That would be a beautiful game. So maybe someday, before the Switch's life cycle is over, we also see something like that. But to summarize my speculation here, I think there's a possibility, a decent one, that Cadence of Hyrule, the DLC retail release package, will be the only Zelda content for this year. But I am still sort of maintaining my prediction that Breath of the Wild 2 could come out this year. Even if it's not coming out this year, I think all the evidence suggests that the game is very far along, and if it does come out sometime in 2021, it's going to be a very big, very ambitious, awesome Zelda game. And I think they could use it to sort of push the 35th anniversary celebrations for Zelda. But not only would I expect Breath of the Wild 2 to be done for that, but also potentially we could see Skyward Sword HD and maybe in a collection with Wind Waker and Twilight Princess HD to match the sort of collection we may be getting for the Mario Remasters, which at this point is still rumored, but I am assuming is likely real. So maybe we could see both Breath of the Wild 2 and a Zelda Remaster collection at some point in 2021. That would be really cool to see, and I think it's at least possible. But what do you guys think? Do you guys think I'm on the right track, or do you have different ideas? Let me know in the comments below. Anyways everyone, this is On Just Restart. Thank you so much for listening and watching, and I'll see you all really soon. Take care.